Good afternoon, welcome back ladies, gents and Pikachus. Another comment response from a guy called ChrisFineganTunes an hour ago. Now this guy's bemoaning my video that I made about atheism and the points I made about gravity being a theory and the Big Bang being a theory. So let's go through some of what he has said. Oh, another theist pretending to understand but BBT while demonstrating that they understand only the most basic pop culture version of the BBT. So the BBT is the Big Bang Theory. Now, he's actually, it's kind of stupid. What I said in my video was that because the Big Bang Theory is a theory, the reason we call it a theory despite knowing that it's 99% probably true, is because there's no evidence of it. And the reason there is no evidence of it is because whatever caused it creates physics. So before physics was in existence, whatever created physics we can't see that. And I suggested that whatever that thing was God causing the explosion that the Big Bang was, that caused life, you know, because in Genesis it is described in that way. But he's saying I'm another theist. Now, I'm actually not a theist. He is showing his amateur level of knowledge here because he thinks I am a theist because I'm a Christian. But what he doesn't understand is a theist is a person who believes generally that there might be a God and that God intervenes in the galaxy or in people's lives, but it isn't a specific belief. So if you become a believer of a specific faith, you are not a theist. Now, many people make this mistake in the atheist community, and that's fine, it doesn't really matter to them. Like I said before, they like to create speculative logic trails to explain things they don't understand or that don't have an explanation, and that's what he's doing here. Calling me, quote unquote, another theist, pretending to understand the Big Bang Theory. I understand the Big Bang Theory. It's not difficult to understand. You don't need to be a professor of physics. You don't need to have a degree in astrophysics or anything. You don't have to be a mathematician. All you need to do is read 2 pages of very basic science to understand what the Big Bang Theory is. And the Big Bang Theory is that there was nothing, so everything was compacted into an infinitesimally small point. So it was a speck, it wasn't big, it was nothing surrounding a big, big empty space, and that was surrounding an infinitesimally small point of infinite density and energy, which he kind of alludes to here in his we'll go through what he says about that. But saying while demonstrating that they understand only the most basic pop culture version of it. Brother, that is it. It's not a pop culture understanding of it. That literally is word for word what the Big Bang Theory is. The Big Bang Theory speculates that a Big Bang came out of an infinitesimally small dot filled with infinite energy and density, which obviously is going to be pressurized and hot if there was physics to have caused that. But as we know, the Big Bang creates physics. So actually no, the infinitesimally small point of infinite density doesn't have pressure or heat because these things don't exist yet. So I'm sorry if this is insulting for you, my friend, because you seem to think that you have this wide knowledge and you know a lot about it, but you're just wrong there. There isn't those things in existence until after the Big Bang's happened. So that's that out the way. And me demonstrating that I understand only the most basic pop culture version. Look, I don't know what version you think we're talking about. We're talking about the paper called the Big Bang Theory paper. There is only one, okay, so that's what we're talking about. Then he goes on to say, just spend 5 minutes Googling gravitational singularity and you'll quickly discover how different it is to what I just described. See, this is where you muddy the waters because what I'm describing is the Big Bang Theory paper, the official one, which describes what the Big Bang Theory is. Now you're suggesting that we Google something else, gravitational singularity, which is going to lead us elsewhere, but I'm suggesting we stick to the actual official The Big Bang Theory paper describing the Big Bang Theory. So no, we're not going to go onto Google to do that. And you'll quickly discover how different it is to what you described. Well, what you're asking me to Google probably is different to what I described. But as I also described, what I'm talking about is not the thing on Google which you're looking at, incorrectly learning from. What I am talking about is the Big Bang Theory, the original science paper that describes what that is. And then he goes on to say, I'm no expert, but I know enough to know that you're attempting to debunk something that no scientist claims. I'm not trying to debunk the Big Bang Theory. Like, again, you are literally not listening to what I'm saying or reading the words that I've put. You are speculating a logical trail to fit your theory. So you, rather than looking at the evidence and letting that lead you to a conclusion, you're starting with a proposition, and to make that a conclusion, you're then trying to fit that over what evidence that you can create. And that is what I mean about atheists speculating a train of logic that sounds okay, so it passes a smell test with most people, but is actually fucking wrong, like this. So once again, I'm very sorry if this hurts your feelings, Chris Finnegan, but 3 times now you've been wrong, and we're not even halfway through your comment. Then he goes on to say, I'm attempting to debunk something that no scientist claims, and he's no expert in this. So what I think he means is he's no expert in science, which is obvious. But if he was an expert in science, it still wouldn't matter about him making the mistake that I'm trying to debunk something, which I'm not. I'm actually saying it's true. I said that. The Big Bang happened. That's what I think. Even though it's a theory, we've got no evidence, we have enough to know that it probably did happen. And that's what I was saying. So him being an expert or not being an expert isn't the problem here. The problem is he doesn't read. He runs off on this speculative, assumptive journey to try and fit what is available in evidence into the proposition he wants to make a conclusion, rather than starting with the evidence and then letting the evidence draw your conclusion for you. That's what he should be doing. So whether he's an expert or not isn't the problem. The problem is he's not putting the time in to look at the evidence. He's just speculating. That's why he's making these mistakes. Next he says, if the universe came from a singularity, it was an area, not necessarily infinitesimally small point. Well, that's where you're wrong. And he says that was an astronomically dense and hot point, so dense that physics were different. No, there were no physics before that. That's what you fail to understand about the Big Bang Theory. If you read the original paper, the Big Bang is responsible for creating all physics that we have. Before that happened, there were no physics. That is why you have an infinitesimally small point. Look, I can't explain it to you. If you honestly read the Big Bang Theory paper that describes the Big Bang Theory, if you didn't understand it from that simple wording, like I say, it's 2 pages long, it's not hard to understand. I won't be able to make you understand it, but what I would hope that you would understand from me making this video is when you say if as the beginning of the sentence, kind of suggests that you don't actually know what you're talking about. There's no certainty there. If the universe came from a singularity, which it did, which is in the Big Bang Theory paper, if you read it, that's what it says. If the universe came from a singularity, it was an area. If it's a singularity, it's not an area. A singularity is... Do you know why it's called a singularity? Because this is one single speck. It's literally one particle of infinite density and energy. It doesn't have any other features. It doesn't have interactions with anything else because there is nothing else around it. It doesn't have heat. It doesn't have elasticity or thermodynamics. All this stuff you're trying to apply to it to make your point true, it just doesn't have. Please read the original paper. And then he says it was so dense that physics were different. Well, we know there weren't any physics, so that was the difference. The physics didn't exist yet. Then he goes on to say, you know how time dilates as gravity increases, like an interstellar? Well, imagine what would happen if there were a black hole so massive that it broke space-time, so time stopped being a coherent concept. This is just word salad. You know how time dilates as gravity increases? We don't actually know that. That's another part of a theory. The theory of gravitational time dilation, that isn't proven either. We can assess the results that we see, so the evidence of that is observational. You know, it's like anecdotal evidence that builds up. Pretty much everyone's going to believe it because there's a lot of it, but it isn't stock physical evidence, as you would know if you're a scientist. And the fact is, like an interstellar isn't even a full sentence. Well, imagine is the start of your next sentence. Look, I'm not into imagining. If we're talking about science, surely the point of talking about science is to not imagine, is to actually look at the evidence. Which, once again, I'm going to plead with you to fucking do before you start making these comments. Well, imagine what would happen if there were a black hole so massive that it broke space-time. How would it break space-time? You can't break space-time. This is like saying there's multiple universes. You can't have a multiverse. if you've got two universes that are different, separated by a membrane, and you can pass through the membrane from one to the other, it's one universe with a membrane in the middle. It's not a multiverse, and that's what you're saying here. You're saying there could be a black hole so massive in this imaginary thing you're imagining, you're imagining that a black hole could be that big that it would actually pop the universe into two. It wouldn't be two universes, it'd just be one popped universe. Please, like, you've written this like you're trying to tell me about science because I am a Christian, and you imagine in your assumptive, speculative, logical trail that I being a Christian means I can't know about science. But I'll remind you, I was an atheist for 25 years when I read every single scientific text available, including Stephen Hawking's and Einstein's papers. So I suggest you go and do that to see the evidence for yourself. Then you won't need to speculate and make all these mistakes and embarrass yourself like you're kind of doing here to me. I'm not saying anyone else will feel embarrassment towards you, but I feel like if I'd written this to you, I would be extremely embarrassed because it's just dumb. So time stopped being a coherent concept. If you're saying that time stopping would make time incoherent, then that doesn't make sense, because if you can stop time, then you've killed everything and there's nothing. So you've just caused the death of everything. Time is still going to be going on because time itself is a theory, a concept. There is no physical block of time. Time is an observational thing, isn't it? Like, when I'm sat on the ground, my clock's going at a certain speed. When I'm right at the edge of the atmosphere, away from the centre of gravity, my clock is going at a different speed, but time is going the same. The only difference is the mechanics of the clock being affected by the differing level of gravity is affecting the observation on the clock. It doesn't mean time is going any faster or slower. Time always goes at a consistent rate. And the reason we have time and making it go at a consistent rate is because time is worthless if it is not consistent, and we wouldn't bother with having it as an observational measure at all if it wasn't consistent. So it is consistent because we made it up. Time isn't a thing that exists. We created the observational measure of time in order to make sense of this kind of thing. But once again, I'm not going to be able to convince you that time is a thing we created as a theory because you haven't read any of the literature, and clearly you don't actually know anything about it. So please go and read about that, in addition to reading about gravity, Big Bang Theory, all the rest of it. Something for you to do after you finish watching this. Then we get to your final comment. That's the kind of crazy stuff we're dealing with here. We generally, who's we? There's no we, there is you. Like I keep saying this, atheists who say we, you're part of a splinter, like a fanatical group. There is no we in atheism. I know, I was an atheist probably longer than you've been alive. And successfully, I might add, without making silly mistakes like you have littered throughout your comment here. We generally refer, you generally refer to the singularity as infinitely dense. But that's just because its density is beyond comprehension. No, the whole point in being infinite is you... Don't tell me you don't understand what infinite means now. How do you think you can tell me anything about science in this comment when you don't understand gravity, you don't understand the Big Bang Theory, you don't understand enough about space, time and density and gravity to really even grapple with these questions? Then you tell me I don't know anything simply because I have a belief in Christianity, which you incorrectly call me as a theist, which I'm not, I'm a Christian. Then you said time stopping would be incoherent, even though it wouldn't, because we create time as an observational thing. So if there's nobody there to observe it, it still exists as a concept, and it's still consistent. And then your last hurrah is to say, as you say, infinity is not a real number. It's a word we use when numbers stop making sense. No, it's not. Infinity makes perfect sense to me. Infinite numbers are not numbers that don't make sense. Like if you put... oh dear. If you put yourself in the position of a mathematician, or someone who is good at science, for instance, like someone who developed the theory of the Big Bang and actually made it stick, you know, not someone who just assumes and guesses through their comments like you do. If you put yourself in that position and you're dealing with an equation, sometimes you will meet a variable which is infinite, or the possibility of it changing up and down. It has an infinite range. That is not... It makes sense. The whole point in having the infinity sign to put in your maths is to make sense of it. Again, it's like the time thing. Time would be worthless as a concept, and we wouldn't use it if it was so flimsy that time stopping would destroy the concept. You can't destroy a concept by physically stopping time like that. Even if it were possible for you to stop time, you would stop as well. So your observation would stop, but the measure of time would always exist. It's like, we know what a meter is, right? A meter is a stock imaginary observational measure. Now, if everyone on Earth is blown up in a big nuclear war and there's no humans left, a meter is still going to be a meter, is it not? That's time. An hour is still an hour. Whether you're up in space and your clock's not working, whether you're at the centre of the Earth and it's going really fast, whether you're in the middle of space and you've got a digital one and it's not using gravity, but it's for some reason different, maybe you shifted through Star Trek, you know, or No Man's Sky gravitational theory or some ridiculous thing happened and your digital clock still works, it doesn't matter. The theory of time is solid, that's why we use it. The theory of infinite numbers is solid, that's why we use it. The theory of black holes is solid, that's why we use it. And the theory of the Big Bang is solid, and that's why we use it. So in conclusion, none of what you say is accurate or true. And as a little tip for you, I kind of feel like the way that you write your comments is a bit sneery and sarcastic and passive aggressive, which would be fine if you were correct and you had done the work and I was arguing with the work you'd done, so you'd have a reason to be offended and upset by me. But what I feel like here is this whole thing is just a cover for you shouting at someone who believes in God, which you don't like and agree with. So you are basically discriminating against me by putting all this as a cover over me, even though none of it's true, making it out like you know everything when you don't, and making out like I know nothing, so that you can victim, oppressor, you can do that thing, you know, the oppressor, oppressed, what's it called? Hegelian dialect, that's the one I was looking for. You are trying to enforce a Hegelian dialect over me and yourself so that you can be oppressed by me believing in God that you're not allowed to, you can't access. And that means I can't know anything about science, but you, because you're an atheist, must know everything about science and must be completely believed and have done all the research, because of course you have, that's what atheists do. And because of that, you've written this to try and insult me, and in the end, in conclusion, you just embarrass yourself with a ton of amateur mistakes. So please, rethink this before you come back to me with a reply. I'm quite happy to discuss science with you. I love science. You can't see because it's out of shop now, but I do have a massive library full of books, which I've been collecting for the good part of 38 years. And many of those books are from when I was an atheist, and concern myself with things like science, gravity, mathematics, science, physics, space travel, theories, you know? So I know something about those, and I think if you want to discuss these things with me, I'm absolutely happy to, but I would suggest that you go and do the legwork and make the effort required to learn these things in detail. Then you won't have to say things like, this is the kind of crazy stuff we're dealing here. In a word, we use this number infinity when numbers stop making sense. You won't need to say, well, imagine what would happen if, when you're talking about black holes. You wouldn't have to say, I'm no expert, because you'd have faith in your own comprehension to say, well, I am kind of an expert, especially compared to this dumb Christian who isn't going to know anything, which there's another mistake you made, was assuming I wasn't going to know about science. And your original proposition that I'm another theist pretending to understand the Big Bang Theory, when actually I do understand the Big Bang Theory, as we went through, because it's 2 pages long, and it's actually you that hasn't read it. And that's the end of this video, so please rethink your comment, come back and we'll talk, but don't come back if you're just going to do this. Do the effort, make the effort to obtain the wisdom and the knowledge that you need to have this conversation with me, and then we will go from there. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed that. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. And I'll say to you as well, Chris Finnegan, I have been in your shoes. I have been a gobby knows-it-all atheist who hasn't done the work but thinks he has, but you have never been in my shoes. So just think about that before you reply, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.